Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome yet again to Dinner Guide. I'm your host Chef Andy, and today we are going to be bringing an Asian touch to our cooking. We're going to be making an orange inspired dish. So this is a very similar touch to orange chicken, but we're going to be making orange beef. I'm also going to be showing you how to make a very simple vegetable medley, which we're also going to be pairing all these very ingredients before us today. But before we get to that part, we'll proceed by introducing what we'll be working with today. And I'll start from the very front, where we have one medium-sized egg. You're also going to require some salt and some sugar, some cherry tomatoes, just a few pieces to give it a bit of color, some teriyaki sauce and some dried thyme leaves. You're also going to require some oyster sauce, some vinegar and some cornstarch. You're also going to require a medium-sized carrot, one piece of courgette, about half a head of broccoli, and one ripe orange. You're also going to require about 150 grams of beef fillet, some tamarind sauce, about a tablespoon. You're also going to be using some bean sprouts, some oil for frying, some pepper to crush, and last but not least, some stock to cook with. But before we get to the beginning stage of this very simple dish, we will take a break now, allowing you to grab your pens and papers, and we'll catch you after a very short break. See you in a little while. Welcome back, viewers. For those of you who are just catching up with the show, we've just been introducing the ingredients before us, and we're going to start this very simple dish by first of all slicing our beef. So very simply proceed to move your meat to your board, and always very important to remember, never proceed to work with your meat while it's still wet. So very importantly, proceed to dry your meat off completely using some kitchen towel, of course. And also a very important pointer, try not to use tissue paper for those of you who may actually be tempted to do so. Remember, it will actually leave some fiber on your food. So try and actually use kitchen towel that is actually designated for the kitchen. So very simply proceed to grab your beef, and we're going to first of all cut our chunk into half. And now just proceed to cut that into some beautiful half inch slices. And once that's done, proceed to slice that, or rather slice that very thinly into some 1/4 inch strips. So it should actually resemble almost your small finger in size. And proceed to do the same with the rest. Now for this particular recipe, I'm going to be working with beef fillet. If you have no possibility of being able to find beef fillet for this recipe, you can also work with the rump roast. That will also work very well. For those of you who also may be tempted to work with sirloin or any cheaper cuts, just very much remember to always get the best cut of your meat, and also try and get meat that is actually very lean in fat. So just to finish that off, we're going to proceed to move that into a bowl. And next up, proceed to turn your board. Always handy to try and avoid any contamination whatsoever. Now next up, we're going to start making our mixture for the beef. Remember, it's a very simple batter. For this, you will require some cornstarch, You will also require 1 split egg, so very simply proceed to crack your egg over your mixture and only allow for your egg white to pour into the bowl, and proceed to remove your egg yolk. Always important with a quick rinse under the tap. Now proceed to mix everything together using a whisk. Of course, always reconstituting any of the mixture that is on the sides. And it should actually resemble a very light paste, so you should actually stop at the point where you have a nice consistent paste. But very important to always mix in also the ingredients on the sides of your bowl. And now once that's combined, you can proceed to grab your beef and add that to your bowl. And very quickly proceed to mix through. Now at this stage you may actually want a hot pot of oil on the heat. Remember, this will go straight into the oil. But very importantly, give it a nice thorough mixture. Remember, you can also mix this anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes before cooking. For the meat as well, always remember, if you're going to be working with meat that's in the fridge, always take it out at least 20 minutes before time. That should give it enough time to relax and come to room temperature. And very importantly, for those of you who may also not be very cautious with your cooking, very important that you drain your meat completely. Remember, if you can be able to see from the bottom of my bowl, there is no traces of blood, so very important to pay attention to that. Remember, blood will carry a lot of pathogens which will actually contaminate your food, so be very wary of that. Right, so once that's hot, we're going to proceed to check our oil for heat. So very simply, I always like to use a bit of flour or a bit of cornstarch. You can just sprinkle that over your oil. As soon as it starts to bubble, as soon as it hits the surface of the oil, then it should actually be ready for you to proceed to fry. Right, so your oil is now hot. Proceed to add your strips of beef one at a time. Of course, always dropping one piece at a time to allow for them to actually begin to cook slightly and avoid for them to actually become attached to each other. Now proceed to just place your pieces very randomly around the sides of your pot. Right, now once you have at least most of your base of your pot covered in your beef, proceed to just give that a bit of a shake. Remember, that always allows for you to break those pieces apart. Also allows for the oil to really coat the sides of your meat and also avoids for them to stick together. And now, very handy, always have an extra pair of tongs to actually take your mixture out of the oil. So we're going to allow those to fry until they are quite crispy, so it will actually give it a very rough consistency. But you should not be worried at this stage. Remember, this is only the first cooking of your beef. We are going to incorporate all our other ingredients a little later in the cooking process. Right, so that should actually begin to color very quickly. You should be able to see those nice specks of brown on the sides of your meat. And once you get to that stage, proceed to remove from the oil. Of course, always giving it a bit of a shake. Once done, proceed to do the same for the rest of your beef. So this is a very quick process. Remember, this is something you may not want to do and leave your pot unattended. Remember, your meat is very tender, and particularly a very big pointer for this particular stage, very easy to overcook your meat, so be very vigilant on watching for the full cooking process. And also always try and control your temperature. If you're going to be working with a deep fryer, you may want to set it for anywhere between 160 and 180 degrees. It will cook this very, very, very nicely. Now just getting to the last and final piece. Now proceed to cook as you did for the first process. Of course, giving your pot a shake. Remember, very, very importantly, if you're not very accustomed to playing with oil or working with oil, do take a bit of precaution, especially for yourself. Remember, there's not really much emphasis in making good food if you're not going to enjoy it. So very, very importantly, always make sure to take precautions. You actually can also find, there are actually aprons out there with long sleeves. So if you're actually very much afraid of working with oil, you can alternatively switch to a longer piece of tongs. Remember, it will allow for you to work without really coming into contact with oil. But be very vigilant to control your temperature, as I mentioned. And second of all, never leave your pot unattended. And try also not to fry your food when you're next to kids. Right, so this is now fully cooked. We'll just turn off our heat completely. Proceed to remove our pieces. Right, once that's done, proceed to allow your oil to sit on the side to cool off. Now your beef strips are done. This is now almost ready now. Remember, we still have to take this through the sauce, so I'm just going to sit this behind us. And next up, we're going to proceed to work with our vegetables. So heat your pan very quickly. And very, very simply, begin to start chopping your vegetables. So for this, you're going to start off by slicing your carrot right through the center. And just by slicing that diagonally, proceed to slice some very thin, about 1/4 inch strips. And do for the same for the other half. Proceed to also take the edges of your courgette completely. Proceed to cut once lengthways, and as you did with the carrots, proceed to slice this into half each chunk, so try and make them a little bigger than the first set of pieces. Next, proceed to grab your head of cauliflower or your broccoli, and proceed using a sharp knife to just begin to take out the flowers. Of course, always making sure to try and trim closest to the head, farthest from the stem. And also something very important to always do, always make time to clean your broccoli really well. Remember, there could be insects or bits of sand in there. So do take some time to clean your head of broccoli very, very nicely. For those of you who may wonder what you could always do with this last piece, you could always throw this in your vegetable stock. Remember, vegetables will always really give you quite a bit of beautiful stock to work with, as you can see on the side. So always save the trimmings that you get from your vegetables. They always come quite handy. Now to start us off, we're going to start by adding some oil to our pan. And now this is just a very simple technique of just frying up your vegetables. So we're going to start off by adding our broccoli. Very gently crush some black peppercorns in there. And just toss that very quickly on your pan. As soon as you start to get the beautiful specks of color, proceed to add your other ingredients. Of course, always starting with what cooks longest, finishing with what cooks shortest. But for this particular reason that we're just doing a very simple stir fry, you may actually just want to throw them in at once. Drizzle a small bit of oil if your pan is a little dry. Toss those together. Now just to bring the flavors onto this very simple technique, add a bit of soy sauce. Add a bit of your teriyaki sauce. And also add a bit of some dried thyme. Toss through once more. And at very high heat, allow for your liquid to completely be absorbed. And season very lightly with some salt. Now just to break the consistency of your mixture, I always like to add a few tablespoons of some vegetable stock. Remember, this also allows for you to combine your flavors very well. Now proceed to give that a toss. And remember, very important to allow your liquid to completely evaporate. Remember, this is a first sign of your ingredients actually absorbing all or some of your flavors. And now just as soon as you start to notice your courgette starting to soften, proceed to add your bean sprouts. And once more toss through. Drizzle once more with a very small dash of oil. Remember, it's very important to make sure that your pan doesn't dry out at this particular stage. It's actually very easy to move from a very pleasant taste of your teriyaki and your soy sauce, and it may actually be very, very bitter, so be sure to keep tossing completely. And also, this also aids in cooking your vegetables a little faster. Now to finish our dish off, proceed to add your tamarind sauce. Proceed to toss through once more, allowing for a beautiful coat of your tamarind over your vegetables. And for those of you who may also be looking at options other than using a frying pan, if you do have a wok in your presence, you can actually use that. It will save you quite a bit of time. It may actually also aid you in cooking a bit more of your mixture. Right, now once your vegetables are nice and soft, proceed to turn your heat very, very low and proceed to toss continuously until all of your liquid is absorbed, and then turn off and proceed to allow to rest very slightly before plating. But before we get to that stage, we will take a very quick break and just finish cleaning up our station, and we'll catch you after the very short break. So see you in a very short while. Welcome back, viewers. For those of you who are just tuning in, we're coming to the last and final part of this very simple dish. Now, just to finish the sauce off, very, very simple sauce actually. For this technique, onto a preheated pan, you will proceed to add about a tablespoon of sugar. Also add your vinegar. Season with a small pinch of salt. Now basically all you need to do is move your pan around just to allow for your sugar to dissolve completely. And while you wait for that, very simply using a grater, proceed to grate in some of your rind from your orange, making sure of course not to grate any of the white flesh into your mixture because it will turn it a bit bitter. Proceed to go around. And remember, these beautiful specks of orange will give it a nice beautiful hint of orange. They also really give it a nice beautiful appearance. Now once you've got some of that zest in there, proceed to also squeeze in some of the juice. So very importantly, give it a firm press over your board. And while holding a sieve over your mixture, proceed to squeeze in your juice. Now at this stage you should have your pan at completely low heat. Remember, you don't want to evaporate the mixture, you want to combine the flavors. And once done squeezing, proceed to do the same for the second half of your piece. And as I mentioned, this is orange. It's actually a very similar recipe to orange chicken for those of you who are big fans of Chinese cuisine. And it's a very simple sauce to make. Once you've got your sugar completely dissolved and you've got your orange juice combined, all you need to do is now bring it to the boil very slightly and add a bit of stock. Remember, stock will allow for a beautiful balance of flavors. It will also cut the saltiness and the sweetness of the sauce and also gives it a nice, beautiful, elevated flavor. So we're going to allow that to come to the boil very quickly. You can actually season at this stage with a bit of some crushed black peppercorns. And if you're also tempted to add a bit of honey, it will also help in giving you a nice, beautiful consistency to your sauce. But now I'm going to be using a very different thickening agent for this recipe. So begin by grabbing a small bowl, and to that you could add either a bit of water or a bit of vegetable stock. Proceed to scoop in about a teaspoon of some cornstarch and mix through. Now as soon as that's mixed in, proceed to add that to your sauce. And now what this does is it gives it a nice beautiful gelatin finish and also allows for your sauce to thicken a little faster. But remember, there are alternatives to using cornstarch. You can actually add a bit of honey. It will also aid in thickening your mixture very quickly. Now you can give that a mix. And of course what you're looking at is a thick sauce, one that can be able to coat your beef very nicely. So very important to give it a mix. Remember, mixing also allows for a quick evaporation of the liquid and a faster thickening. Also allows for you to make sure that all your flavors combine very nicely to the center of your pan. And as soon as that starts to actually bubble a little slower, moment you see all the specks of bubbles right over the surface, proceed to add your beef and begin to mix through. And all you're going to do at this stage is allow for the liquid to continue cooking while also seasoning your beef. And all you're going to do now is proceed to swirl your pan around. Of course, moving your pieces and making sure they touch the surface of the pan, making sure they actually absorb the flavors of your meat and the orange jus that you're making at the moment. And now while that reduces, I'm just going to grab our plate. So as we did, we actually plated the vegetables that we cooked a little earlier. And now we're just going to finish this off. Now, one particular thing to also pay attention to when making orange chicken, remember this dish may not really sit well overnight or in the refrigerator. This is one of the many particular dishes that you may want to actually prepare on the spot. Remember, the sugars will caramelize and they will get really tender. But the moment this mixture goes into your refrigerator and stays overnight, it will actually gain quite a bit of chewiness. So, as I mentioned, if you can actually take the time to prepare your ingredients in advance, it should be very, very simple to make this one pot dish in about 10 to 15 minutes, just in time for dinner. Right, so once your chicken is done, just proceed to tilt your pan, holding the handle right in front of you, and begin to just pull back your pieces of beef. Remember, this particular technique allows for you to get a nice even coating of your zest, and it allows only for the liquid to sink to the bottom, or rather to the other side of your pan. And once that's done, proceed to turn off completely, tilt your pan to the side, and you can proceed to plate your orange beef. Making sure to grab each and every one of your pieces. And of course, never proceed to waste any of your juices. So using a spoon, just scoop those and just proceed to drizzle right over your plate and right above your vegetables. And last but not least, proceed to pour the rest of your sauce right above your beef. That, ladies and gentlemen, is my very simple take of orange beef, Chinese style, served with some grilled vegetables. I hope you've managed to pick something interesting on the show today, and I hope you've also managed to learn something you can be able to play around with. As I also mentioned, very, very mixed techniques of cooking Asian as opposed to cooking African, which we're used to. A nice, beautiful adaptation of sweet and sour, and that very much is as simple as it gets. Thank you for tuning in today. I will remind you to check out our Facebook page, leave your comments, inquiries, or any particular issues pertaining the show. We're very much ready to hear from you. But from the studios, I will bid you farewell. I'll enjoy this beautiful, beautiful dish, and see you soon.